You might already know this, but I launched a coaching business about 3 months ago, and it's focused on helping people really expand into the fullest version of themselves. The client work that I've done so far has really reinforced for me that this is a direction I want to move in. So at this point, I'm ready to invest more heavily into my brand, the look and the feel, the experience around interacting with me. And I was thinking, as I started going down this path, it might be kind of cool to actually pull back the curtain and show you what that process actually looks like. So I recorded our meeting with our visual designer. Her name's Chris Lemar. She's really, really talented. She's got like part artistic mind, part strategic mind. And we did a mood board review with her where we got to first we spoke to her about like the core values of the brand and really the type of experiences we want to create and how we want people to feel. Then I made a Pinterest board with all these different images that kind of inspired me in one way or the other, and she made these mood boards. So in this next video, you're going to see us talking about the mood boards. You'll see which one we choose. That's going to then inform how the brand takes shape. You know, what's the typography? What are the colors? What's the logo going to end up being? It all starts with some of this foundational work, and I just thought it was kind of a cool conversation, so I recorded it. So, yeah, this is that.
Oh, wait.
Oh my God. I'm keeping,
You're a
I'm keeping
panda?
this.
Why is there not two pandas?
I don't think it works that way.
Okay. I'll change the panda off at least. I don't know what's happening with mine. This is weird.
We're
My
we're
God.
uh we're updating our pandaness here in a second.
That would be really funny.
Okay. Is there a lighter background that we can use or?
How about I just do none?
Okay. We're sitting here. Renee's next to me. Chris is across the country in Michigan. And hi, Chris. So we have Chris here because I thought it would be kind of fun to pull back the curtain for my people on this journey I'm on of creating a brand around my coaching business. I think a lot of times when we're starting something new, we tend to like lock ourselves in a closet and go and create the thing, and we come back out and we've got this polished, thing to show the world. Uh, a lot of what I want to do in coaching is going to be to sort of question that paradigm. I think that when we're growing, we can do it, you know, out front too, if we're willing to be vulnerable. So this is me pulling back the curtain to show everybody, hey, I'm going to build this brand, and I really want to do it the right way, which is why I brought Chris on. And I see value in brand, especially for something like coaching, because the easiest way for me to market my coaching would be to actually record my conversations and share them. But due to the nature of what happens in those conversations, I can't do that. So I don't have a whole lot of tangible things that I can use to say it's this, which makes the symbols that I use, the words that I use, the colors that I use, the way that people find me, all these things. I need to make these cohesive symbols so that I can create that feeling without actually showing people the thing. So I think if you have a service like that, investing in brand, even if you're small, can be a really smart thing to do. So, Chris, how do I? Well, somebody's knocking on our door.
I'll you guys do it.
We're gonna find out who it
You do
is.
it. This is real life. I mean, it's always
Someone,
interrupting something.
it's somebody selling us solar. It's like, okay, one of our dogs just ran away, and I might have to be right back.
Okay.
This video is brought to you by the farmer's dog.
Dog.
It comes right when you need it to. Okay.
That's awesome.
Anyway,
You're making a healthy pup.
what a commercial.
Great. What's
I
the
was gonna
promo code again so I can get my discount?
getting their name. I was gonna try my best to introduce you, Chris, and I just feel like just saying, "Oh, Chris does graphic design" is such a understatement. So I don't know. How do you describe yourself? Because you've kind of got all these different facets to you.
It's hard. I always just tell people I'm a graphic designer so that they'll nod their head and stop talking to me. It's like people are always like, what do you do? And you're like, an accountant. And people are like, oh,
All
okay.
right,
And then
see
they
you
have
later.
more questions to ask you. It's great. It's hard because like it's such a extension of everything that is based in design. So it's not only like visual, but it's emotional, it's strategic, it's based on business bottom line. So it's hard. So I just say that I'm a visual designer because
Mm.
ultimately I'm making visuals, right? But they have to speak to messaging, they have to speak to market demographics, they have to speak to bottom lines. Like it's basically the easiest way that I can explain what I do. And then that way it encompasses everything. Visual is everything. It could be a website, it could be a brand deck, it could be a DNA deck, it could be mood boards. It totally
Yeah.
encapsulates all of it.
That's what I've found. So I've worked with you in past jobs, now on my own projects. We've done a lot of stuff together. And that's what I found that's really unique about you, because I've worked with other designers. Many of the designers I've worked with, they've definitely got, an artistic vision, and they can live in that space. But the strategic side is somewhat lacking, where you almost feel like you have to tell them this is exactly what we need to do. Whereas you're going at it from this, you boil it all the way down to like, wait a minute, what is the intention here? And then that intention makes its way into everything else. So I just think that's super unique, and like makes, whenever I get to come onto one of these with you, I get so excited because I'm like, oh, she's gonna explain it in a really cool way. So
That's funny.
tell them what we're doing with this.
Yeah. So I always want to start with any type of brand thing. We always want to make sure that we're getting through from basically what is the core of everything. So what we did originally was we started the brand DNA, which is going through and talking about what your personality is, what the archetype is, what is your, pillars and your brand values, and why do you exist, or what is your mission basically. And once we have that, which is always a great starting place for any brand, I don't care if you're doing visuals or if you're just doing marketing or social media, then you have like all these core kind of north pointing things. So from there, you have to make a jump from strategy, brand understanding, all of that to visual. In order to do that, the best way to make a leap is to do mood boards. So that's why we think that's like a good interim step. And that's why for these, you sent me the Pinterest board. I was like, send me things that inspire you, send me things that maybe the messaging speaks to you or that you feel like is in alignment with your brand, because you know yourself better than I do. And then from there, it's a very easy process for some people to just distill down and say, okay, like I'm getting this vibe from here, I'm getting this vibe from here. And while they're definitely cohesive under the brand DNA structure, they're still distinct in their own way. So that's when we come up with distinct mood boards. So there's two mood boards. We have the Traveler, which is the first one that we're going to walk through. And this is going to be, we're leaning into one side of the core values and what we are, and the second one leans kind of into a second side. So while they're all still cohesive, they're just pulling the levers a little bit more on one or the other.
Mm.
So for this one, because it has a lot more of an adventurous spirit, we're leaning into and elevating curious, humorous, and self-aware, right? So those were our pillars that we're standing on. And that's how they're directly feeding into our visual experiences, right? So this mood board has a lot more of this kind of summit, big picture thinking, like, we're on a big, very exciting journey. And these are all still feeding back into the idea of like we're here and we're based around health, adventure, relationships, experience, and purpose. These are directly from the brand DNA. And we're pulling the different assets from the Pinterest board, which is interesting because when I saw like a lot of the pictures, there are a lot of big, beautiful mountains kind of taken from far. So you see this perspective of a journey, right? But then you have other elements that are coming in as well, like pops of color, bits and pieces of typography, things that we can kind of pull together that give you an idea of like, this is a vibe versus this is, visual direction, one for one on what we're going to do for the brand. So I think that this one was what you initially were leaning into, and like really it was like, this is it. And then the funny and sometimes shocking things come out of when we look at what's the secondary item that we see in those themes of this Pinterest board, right? So the other way that we lean and pull levers is honest, human, humble, all still part of our brand DNA, all very much who we are. And then just elevating those in a visual tone. So going from something like this to going to something like this, we're still having the same thing, still health, adventure, relationship, experience, and purpose, but it's doing it in a very different way. We're seeing more warmth. We're seeing some more human elements. We're starting at the beginning of the journey more so visually than we are at the apex or the summit, the end of the journey. So these are just kind of ways that we can start to visually say, this is the kind of vibe that I want my brand to start to encapsulate, and do it really quickly and not have to go through so many brand iterations, so many visual design revisions and things that maybe not won't serve us because we get muddled down in the middle of it. So that's kind of where the mood boards were. And I think it's a really good exercise.
Yeah, it seems to me like it's one of those, it's like a really good checkpoint instead of kind of giving a visual designer the direction, and then they say, yeah, I think I know what you mean. And then they go all the way to the end where they've developed a logo and typography and colors and website layout. They're saying, hey, all the way at the beginning here, is this really what you meant? Which I just think is super for me as a visual person, as an aesthetic person, for me to see how it could be translated is so useful. It does lead, because I feel like everything you make is so good. I'm often like, damn it, now I got to make another brand so I can use both of these. But so yeah, what you said about, can we go back to the first one, the traveler? Renee said the word, because we got a chance to look at these a little bit before we talked today, but she said this one really immediately made me feel like a pump of adrenaline, I think you said.
It's like, I'm going to be summiting something. I'm going to be,
I'm setting out, or I'm on
I'm
the,
starting this big adventure. I'm going to be climbing a mountain, and you get this like heightened feeling of like excitement
yeah.
and a lot of energy.
And that is exactly what I felt when you sent this over. I scrolled down, first option. I'm like, she did it. Boom, we're done. Because I felt that. But sometimes it's good to have these options, because I had to sit there and reflect and go, hang on a second. Like, sure, that adrenaline, that action, that masculine energy is a big part of your journey, and it's attractive to you, and you've leaned into a lot of that. What are you actually doing with your service? And the service that I want to provide is this place of safety in a way to actually dampen down some of that adrenaline. Sometimes we got to really figure ourselves out and get really clear on our intention before we run out the door after that adventure. So like, after I let the adrenaline cool down a little bit and really had to think more, and also listen to some really good feedback from you guys on our little slides, I was like, man, as much as that first one excites me, I don't think that it really speaks to the full breadth of not only who I am, but who I think the brand can become.
I also think, just to point out, like when you're embarking on a process with a coach or with a therapist or with a friend, a lot of times I think you have to dial down that adrenaline, and you have to be still and like really get yourself out of this, like, oh my gosh, I have to climb. I have to go, and really sit on the ground, dig in the dirt, like get a little bit messy. And that doesn't always feel exciting and inspirational and like achievement, like I think the first one does. The second one is just very real, authentic, and like, hey, let's get in the weeds, let's get in the dirt. Let's dive in.
Well, I talked about, and I think it was on the podcast I did with Chad, the idea behind navigating versus being. And we went and did this breathwork ceremony, and they tell you to have like an intention going into it. And it was when I was first starting to be okay with, okay, I'm going to do the announcement. I'm finally ready to launch my coaching business. So I had all this stuff running through my mind like crazy, high adrenaline, right? I'm sitting in that spot, and she's coming around the room, getting everybody's attention, and navigate was just flowing through my mind. Navigate it, navigate it, navigate it. And the facilitator, her name's Anahata. She's very grounded energy. As soon as she put her attention onto me, she didn't say my name yet, and I just blurted out being. So it was like her energy knew, oh, this guy thinks, his logical brain is saying navigate. His subconscious brain needs to understand how to just be in order for him to navigate. So the more I really wrap my head around these concepts, the more I'm like, shit, I can't do this unless I create that place of warmth, groundedness, and safety. And I think the second option is much more in line with that.
Yeah, that's great too, because that saves us a lot of time of, oh, I don't know why this brand is not feeling right to me, because you can get a presentation and get all these beautiful brand boards, great mock-ups, totally in line with everything that we've talked about from a strategy point. And then it's like, well, something doesn't feel right. It's like, well, because we didn't figure out what the mood was first. So now I feel like we have a really good starting tool, and that way it's getting us in that right path sooner. So I'm glad that you guys have kind of agreed on it.
About like brand identities, I think, is a lot of times the things that we like as human beings versus the way we want people to feel are very different. And so like the first option, the adventure or the traveler, I feel like that's things that you like.
Oh yeah, I was just like, yeah,
personally.
more.
That's brands that you like, you see that aesthetic. But then when you like, a brand is so much about expressing meaning and making people feel a certain way. And when I got to this mood board, I felt so different than when I felt the other way. And I was like, this is the feeling that I think that you're trying to capture.
Well, this is where I want to meet people in
Mhm.
their journeys, you know. Will it be great to meet some people who are at their past midway point and they've got a little further to go? Sure. But one of the things that I think I can lean into is that I'm on this journey myself, and I know what it's like to be at that confusing starting point. Some would say almost like a rock bottom, where you're just like forced into a transformation in your life. And the last thing I was thinking about when I was at rock bottom was what the top of the mountain looked like. I just wanted to get my ass off the fucking floor.
Mhm.
I'll bleep out the F word, maybe we'll see. But
I say
No
leave
way.
yeah, okay, we'll do it.
Unapologetic.
I think an important thing too, just in this process too, like usually you say this at the beginning of client meetings for mood boards. This isn't your final color palette. This isn't your actual typography. This is really about like, look at this and react and take note of your feeling. How does this make you feel? What do you think this board is expressing to you? And that's what we're trying to capture versus like, oh, I don't really like, the color orange. And it's like, well,
I noticed that. Well, actually, thank you for bringing it up because I want to like speak to whoever does watch this. I wanted Chris to be able to explain, like, so that Renee and I worked in brand, Chris obviously for a long time, so we all can immediately like process in our minds, oh, that second one's more warm. Well, there was deliberate choices that Chris made to make it feel like that. So can you just explain that to the person who like maybe they do zero in too much on one thing, or they're a little bit more of a linear thinker where they're like, what the hell are they talking about? How do they know it's warm or cold? Or what are some of the choices you made for the second one for somebody that maybe hasn't spent as much time doing this?
Sure. So actually, I can tell you how I work the process, and that might be helpful too. Is so like what I'll do is I'll take everything off your Pinterest board, like absolutely everything, and I'll throw it in a design program, and I'll start to move things. I draw a line, and I move some things off to one side, and some things off the other side, and some I put up above because I'm like, I don't know, it could fall into either, or I haven't really felt strongly one way or the other about it. And so if you do that after you get kind of down to your last couple of imagery or images that you pulled, you look at it and you think, okay, there's a very clear starting of this happening here, and this is starting to happen here. And I usually go out and either already have an idea of, or I have assets that I'm like, this feels like it kind of fills in here, and this feels like it kind of fills in here. So that way you get something that feels cohesive and has unity, even though it's, so many disparate parts of other things that are brought together. That's usually what makes a good mood board, is that it feels cohesive, even though it's just literally bits and scraps of stuff you pull from everywhere. And then from there, you kind of vibe check it. Like I said, when I sent the email, I said, hey, the mood boards are looking really great. I'm really excited where they're at, but I want a day to just set with it and then come back and look at it and just make sure that it feels right. So that way you kind of go through, and I'm glad that I did, because I tweaked some of the colors and I tweaked some of maybe the images that I use and swap them out. So they felt like two very cohesive sets. So you've got a very like cooler tones here. We've got stacked all capital letters. We have things that feel very aspirational from an imagery point. There's a lot of peaks, there's a lot of mountains, there's, an apex triangle in the cottage, even in the cabin. So there's this visual unity in symbols that are, probably even secondary that people are registering. And this feels very different from this, which has some circular elements, it has more organic shapes, it has warmer color palettes. And so those are the things that you check when you start those dividing lines, and then you kind of suss them out and pull them in to make a mood board, because it's exactly what it is. Basically, this is just a branding vibe check. It's like, are we on this path? Are we on this path? Is this aligning with what we did in the brand DNA or brand strategy session? And if so, then we've checked our vibe and we know where we're going to go forward in the branding process, probably visually, right? Like Renee said, it's not final product. Colors might change, fonts might change, images might change, but they will inform it directly. So that way, when you look at the end presentation, if it's done properly, you'll get that same mood or that same vibe from the board that you selected.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So we've gone through these, you kind of got our feedback on it. And thank you, Renee, for also helping me make sense of some of the thoughts I was having and feeling. What would be next after this?
Yeah, so this is where like the big lift comes. Basically, what I'll do is I will go away like a hermit for a couple weeks and I'll completely ghost you. Just kidding, I won't ghost you, but I will basically be in what I call like the creative process, or like the the gathering process. So I'll sketch things, I'll write things out that maybe have come from the brand that we had done earlier from the DNA brand deck, or maybe it'll be something that you said during this call where I might say, that was a really good line that Nate said about trees. I'm going to write this down, and I'll usually let that kind of like simmer. It's almost like making a stew. You add a bunch of stuff in, and then you just got to let it simmer for a while. And then what I'll do is after I feel like I've got a cohesive vision, I'll actually start to create. So I might just start creating a flyer. Like maybe that's where I want to start, as a flyer, making a flyer for Nate. And then it will eventually be like, well, this feels right. And then I'll say, well, what would it look like if I did the homepage of a website? And then I start to pull out the elements. Sometimes the logo will come first, sometimes it'll come last. It just comes when it's ready. And then what we'll probably do is we'll probably come back in like 2 weeks to 2.5 weeks. We've got the holidays coming up, so I'm not sure. We'll have to figure that out. And then I will do a brand presentation. I'll say, okay, here is your options. So taken from brand board 2, we're going to have 2 options, and you could go down this path or this path. They're both the right path for you. And then we can kind of have some discussions around where you guys are feeling. But yeah, it's exciting times.
And then after that, once we kind of decide on that next step, then that's when we'll start to see things like logo show up and all those elements, right?
So those will be all part of the same presentation. So that's why I usually need a long amount of time, because I'm not going to just show you like, okay, well, here's this, Apple AirPod. I'm going to show you, here's Apple's whole site. Here's all of the things that they have. Here's what the brand messaging is. And I'll give you guys that in 2 versions so you can kind of decide. So you have a cohesive eagle eye view of what the brand could be in 2 different directions it could go in. So that's why it takes a lot of work, because it's all the heavy lifting comes in that portion. We've done some smaller lifting. We've done competitive audits. We've done brand DNA, values, obviously the mood boards, all parts of a really good brand. But the big lift is going to be the visual presentation, because it's taking all of those things and putting them into one big thing that we then start to look at and say, okay, I like this, or I could see this going this way.
Yeah, and it becomes so informative for everything that I will. So at some point, Chris doesn't just, although I love it, Chris doesn't just stay alongside me for my whole journey as I build this thing. I got to take what she gives me and use it as tools to build out all my symbols and put it into these different communications that I use for all the things that I want to promote and tell stories about. So I think the elementary version of myself would have, gone into this thing and said, I got to hire somebody to do a logo for me. But that's just one, like you said, that's just one little element that there's no supporting cast that's building it up into this ultimate feeling that really gives people a definite idea of, oh, that's the experience of interacting with him and his brand. So part of the reason I wanted to actually like pull back the curtain and have this conversation with you here is a lot of times we kind of like short term are trying to like save ourselves money, and we shoot ourselves in the foot long term because we don't dream big enough. And we just end up getting this thing that's like, doesn't really serve us all that well, and it doesn't inspire us. And it also doesn't give the user a good idea of whether they should be continuing a relationship with us or going to find what matches better with them. So I just think if you think more long-term, really investing in this part of building a business is so damn important. And I plan on doing this for a long time, which is why I'm okay with making that investment up front.
I feel like you should be honest. At first you were hesitant. You're like, wait, am I ready for Chris?
Damn right. So that's
Thank you, Renee. Renee pushed you. She made you do it.
Like, yeah, you're putting out you're putting out content, you're putting out a website. To be cohesive in the way you're expressing.
Well, a big part of it, like, we really want to get deep about it, was like, well, do I deserve the Chris treatment?
Oh, come on.
Am I official enough to be able to do it this way yet? And I had a good partner who was like, shut up, schedule the call, we're doing this.
I was like, I've already reached out to Chris.
You're like, sorry.
Yeah, all the stuff you heard me say is actually what Renee said to me to get me to go down this path. Am I ready?
You needed it.
Oh shit. But no, it's and then just the bonus is working with somebody like Chris, who is hilarious and really talented and straightforward. So I appreciate you for being willing to do this with us, Chris. And I'm so
round 1.
Yeah, I'm so pumped for the next one.
I can't wait. Like I'm so excited. This is my Christmas. I'm like, I get to do branding with people that I align with, like doing really cool shit. And like, it's just like, this is, have you guys read Flow by Malcolm? Crap. It's not Glasgow, it's the other guy. Love Flow. So he says that when you are doing the work that you're put on world to like do, that like time stops and like everything kind of like bubbles in
All
around you, and
purpose.
it's like you're in flow. And like this branding work, when we're like in the mud and I take my 2 weeks and ghost you, like that's because I'm in flow. And so like I'm so excited because flow is like a really hard state to achieve, but if you're doing and walking like what you were supposed to, or what you feel like you're in line with what you're supposed to do, like it's like people pay me to do this. So I'm excited because this is what I live for. So thank you.
Yeah, it's really evident that you do find that state, because when you go to present it, it is a symphony of it's not just you like, here's the slide, here's this. It's like you telling us, okay, so this is what inspired me about this, and then you explain it so elegantly that you pull us into the story and help us see maybe a vision we couldn't even see. So you're immensely talented. I'm gonna obviously put in like wherever I end up sharing this, I'll put some information for how people can get a hold of you. But just in case they don't look, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you, Chris?
Uh, that's a good one. I'm like, my Instagram is private, my Facebook is blocked. Like,
Your email
usually people
address?
just
Oh,
email me. Yeah, you can email me at hi@werswell, WERESWELL.com.
awesome.
That's my professional email. And if you have wonderful lists of product marketing that you want to sell me, you can also send it there because apparently everyone else does. So
Perfect. Okay. Well, appreciate your time. Thank you for bearing with us through our little farmer's dog commercial. And thank you, whoever ended up watching this. I hope it's somewhat helpful. And we'll see everybody on the next one.